Hello, friends, and welcome to the
We'll
cream
do that
cheese.
again.
Okay, once more with feeling. Here we go. Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast. I'm Daniel Scherl. Today on the show, originally from Venezuela, he's an actor and writer who's deeply passionate about the arts and human rights. After high school, he moved to Los Angeles, where he received a BA in film production. Ever since, he's been working behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera, an experience he says has made him an infinitely better actor by knowing how both sides work. His passion for the arts is fueled by a love of conversation and representation, especially of the Latinx and LGBTQ communities. He's not only incredibly talented, intelligent, and kind, but he makes one of the best cheese plates I've ever seen. Please welcome Luis Selgas.
Thank you. That was very kind.
Well, thank you for being here.
Of course.
All right, let's jump right in. What's Latinx?
Latinx is a term that is somewhat recent, and it is one that's kind of being brought up by this new generation that wants to make things a little bit more gender neutral. It's a little bit controversial because it's gotten some pushback from actually the Latinx community, so people who are Latino or Latina, and they say that that we shouldn't be focusing on language per se, and there are other issues that we should be focusing on, which is a valid point as well. But at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty inclusive term, and I don't see a problem with it.
So you're from Venezuela originally, which is awesome. What was that like growing up?
I have a horrible memory, so I have very small storage capacity in my brain. And I moved when I was 11, so my memories are very little as far as living there. I do have whatever I do remember is nice. I was very fortunate. I grew up with a great family, and Venezuela is a beautiful country. It's got amazing food. The beaches are stunning. I mean, we have the tallest waterfall in the world, the Angel Falls, and it's really a beautiful country. And it's really a shame that it's not great right now.
Well, and you bring up a great subject, which is how are you personally or your friends and family affected by the political situation going on there right now?
I moved to the States with my parents and my sister, so my immediate family is out, and we've been out since 1997, which is right before Chavez took over. But I still have, obviously, very close, like my uncles, my aunts, and we're very close, family friends who are affected. My grandparents are there. I mean, we're affected, like, I guess, a lot of people in the country are affected. There's food scarcity. There's a lack of medicine. Not too long ago, there was electrical issues where the country had no power. So obviously, thankfully, the people who are better off, which my family is fortunate to be in that group, have it better than those who have obviously nothing. But there was a lot of deaths. I mean, when you don't have power, hospitals can't keep medicine good and people alive on support.
So with situations like that, where you have a country that is stunningly beautiful and a place that I think people would love to visit, but there's obviously political turmoil, do you feel that travelers should still go there and support the tourism, or do you think they should boycott?
No. And I wouldn't say no for reasons of boycott. I would say in Venezuela in particular, just it's not safe. It's a beautiful, and I've had people who have asked me, it's like, oh my gosh, I would love to visit. And my first response is don't go now. It's very sad because it's, a formative part of my life and my youth. And again, it's a beautiful country and I wish people could experience it, but it's not a good time.
When did you first fall in love with acting?
In the womb. I don't know. I think one of my favorite things to do is to make people laugh or smile. And I've always just tried to find ways of doing that. And I guess somehow that led me to the stage and then, the camera. And it's always been something that I've really, really enjoyed.
And you went to school for it, obviously.
I did. I graduated from Loyola Marymount, and I graduated with a degree in film production and then a minor in theater and business.
Do you like working behind the camera or in front of the camera more?
That's a tough question. I would probably say being in front of the camera. I've been most recently introduced to behind the camera in screenwriting. I did go to film production, but I always felt like something was missing when I wasn't on stage or wasn't in rehearsals or wasn't, in front of the camera. So there's something I think that innately I just need to do in front of the camera or on stage.
Was there a particular moment for you growing up where you realized, oh man, I want to do this for a living. I want to be an actor?
I mean, I've wanted to do this for a living, probably since high school. But I remember my freshman year of college, I was not a theater minor and I was only a film major and I was focusing only on film. And again, like I just had this feeling of like I was fine, but I wasn't like really happy. And then I didn't notice it until I got cast in my first play in college that I felt that again. And I was like, oh, this is it. And I think that just like reconfirmed that I do love it and it's what I want to do.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite moment so far in your career as an actor that you go, oh, that was awesome?
Thankfully, I feel like I've had a few of those. The one that comes to mind, I did a play that was called Therapy, and I played a young man who, had issues, and he actually ends up committing suicide, which is a touchy subject for my family since we had a loss in the family with that. So I remember doing the play in honor of my aunt. And one night, it was a particularly emotional night. My character is not really supposed to break down or cry for reasons. And I ended up actually kind of crying a lot and having a little bit of a breakdown there. And after the show, everyone's like, oh my God, that was amazing. Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. But I had this one woman come up and she looked at me and all she said was, thank you. And then she hugged me. And it was such a powerful moment because I mean, and maybe I'm assuming, but like what I got from that was that like the experience of watching that show
resonated with her in a very powerful way. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What an incredible gift to have to both receive and give to people. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's really essentially a lot of entertainers in the different varieties of entertainment. I think a lot of them strive towards that kind of a goal, to know that they've at least affected somebody, in a positive way, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like that's the whole point of art. I mean, art is a universal language. I mean, you can connect with people on a very deep personal level that just surpasses language.
Well, let's talk about that with travel. First of all, did you travel growing up as a kid?
I did. My dad's a pilot. He recently retired, but we did grow up traveling a lot. I was like born on a plane. Again, I don't remember a ton.
Now, were you literally born in a plane?
I was not literally born in a plane.
Because that would be a great story for the podcast.
That would be a super. I'm sorry to let you down.
Thank you for dashing my hopes.
But yeah, we did do a lot of traveling when I was younger.
And did you have a favorite place you traveled?
Costa Rica is my favorite place on earth. We have a ranch there, and I grew up going every year. I learned to ride a bike there. It is my favorite place. If I think of it, like I get happy. I know what it smells like. I know what it sounds like.
It's one of the blue zones on the planet.
Yes, and it's a really, really beautiful place. And they're doing a lot for green technology and all that stuff. So that's really cool.
When did you discover that you like to travel, or that you I assume from the way you're talking, you have a passion for travel?
I do. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do it on a pretty regular basis. Thank you for your previous podcast about how to travel and use your points and everything. I definitely listened to that.
My pleasure.
It's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there was a particular moment where I discovered I love traveling, but I think I rediscover how much I like traveling every time that I do travel.
I totally agree. I love the feeling of going to the airport still. Like when I get to the airport and there's people milling all about and I know I'm about to get into a plane and go somewhere cool. I've always loved that kind of rush.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments is takeoff. I love takeoff. I love watching the world just get smaller and smaller, and it feels almost like Legos, like little
Yeah.
people. And I actually, not to like segue here, but like I have one vivid memory, and I was still closeted at the time, and I remember the plane taking off and the world getting smaller, and my brain just went to a place where I was like, I was out. Like I was able to come out. I was talking to my friends, told my family, everything was fine. And I like lived that reality for a minute and then kind of obviously came back to reality where I wasn't out or anything like that. But there was something magical about takeoff, at least for me.
Well, we're going to get back to the coming out story in a second, but I just wanted to tell you that when I was growing up, every time I took a plane somewhere, I would listen to the same song during takeoff. And this is back in the days with Walkmans with cassette tapes that you weren't supposed to listen to them during takeoff. But I was kind of a bad boy and I had my headphones on and I'd listen to the beginning of the song Subdivisions by Rush. And it has this synthesizer riff that goes dun, 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 dun. And it's very just, and it escalates. The song escalates. And as soon as the wheels started moving, I'd click play and I'd listen to that during takeoff. It was the most exhilarating feeling. I think I think life should always have a soundtrack, you know?
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to try to do that.
It's really fun.
I don't do that. I do the sign of the cross out of just superstition.
Cool.
And then I also check the little like knob on the tray table because I watched Final Destination and it ruined my life.
I've never seen it and I don't want to know. So let's talk about you coming out.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
It was a slow process. I came out pretty late, not late in life, but I was like 23. And first it was to a few friends and then my family. And yeah, I mean, I honestly can't complain. I mean, I never had anyone, you know, turn me away or anything like that. I'm again, very fortunate, unlike some people.
Sure.
To have a really
you hear
supportive
horror
family.
stories and
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. So your family's a big supporter then, obviously.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. And so we talked in the intro about your passion for representation and the Latinx and the LGBTQ communities. What do you do personally and professionally to try and help that community and bring awareness to the world and all that kind of stuff? All those good things.
To me, the little grains of sand that everybody can do are, you know, amount to a
Absolutely.
lot. So, I mean, I think just representing by being a kind person and a kind member of that community and being a good example, hopefully. I think that's something that I try to do in my daily life. You know, marches I've been to and supporting in ways that I can. Career-wise, again, I also like to gravitate towards projects that do something. Like I said, art I think is important and it's a really amazing way to connect with people. So if you can use that art in your career to kind of like connect with people maybe who don't think the way that you do, or, you know, represent more of the communities that are not as represented in the media, I think that's a really important thing. And it's something that is happening now.
You know, one of my disappointments in Hollywood, honestly, is I look out at some of the stuff that we put out there and it's like, really? This is what you're doing? There are a plethora of different ethnicities and cultures around this planet that have incredible stories that we have never told. Why are we not mining this and telling these stories? So I think it's awesome that you're part of trying to do that and bring these stories to the forefront. It's a very important thing to do for the future generations.
Thank you.
Question for you. If I handed you $10 million right now and said, do something cool with this, what would you do?
I would finance my movie, which I have a feature that I'm working on that is a thriller.
You want to tell the audience about it? Go ahead.
Sure. It's called Sorry, Charlie, and it is a thriller that is campy in the vein of Scream, not like, you know, Psycho Beach Party or Scary Movie, more like Scream. It's self-aware. It's still scary. The stakes are still high. And the cool thing about it is that the cast is entirely gay. Or queer rather. And yeah, what I really like about it and the whole goal of it is to feature those characters and those voices, but not have it be about that. So yes, we have these amazing stories and we have these amazing experiences, but I think also like what then tends to happen is that like the only time you see, you know, a story about somebody who's Latino, it's, you know, the gang war story, or somebody who is black and it's, you know, the slave story, or Jewish, or, you know, gay, and they're the stereotype. So it's like we have these amazing characters and we have these amazing experiences that inform us as people and as characters, but they shouldn't define us.
Agreed, completely. What do you think you are most passionate about at this stage of your life?
That's a good question.
I only ask good questions, Louis.
I mean, definitely very passionate about my career. It's growing and it's moving and I'm excited for it. I'm also, not to get gushy, and I think she's going to cry if she hears this, but my sister recently moved to Los Angeles. And actually on the way over here, I was thinking about like just how happy I am that she lives close to me. We haven't lived close to each other since I was 18 years old and I moved away for college. And it really... my life is different because of it, and it's better because of it.
That's awesome. I actually wish my siblings and I lived closer. It would be great, but they're on the other side of the country, and you know, we've been separated since we were kids, really, and so we've just kind of grown accustomed to that way of life. And I'm the youngest of 7, so wow. You know, and I'm 48 at the time of this recording,
and looking younger
and
every
looking
day.
24. Let's be honest. No, I don't look 24, but I feel 24, and that's good. You know, I've always, every time someone says to me, you know, how old do you feel? I'm like, I've been 24 since I was 24. I think I honestly, at that age, I was like, well, you know, I'm working out pretty regularly. I eat pretty well. I'm enjoying life. Everything feels good. I think I'm just going to stay here. And I think I honestly have emotionally. And when I talk to friends who are elderly, they all say that that is the key to a healthy life is mentally staying young, because the body will betray you. You know, it will just get older and you have to deal with that stuff. But mentally, I think the key is staying young.
Yeah, agreed.
So when it comes to travel, what do you like most about traveling, and what's been the most rewarding part about travel for you?
I think the one thing that answers both of those questions is just new people, new experiences, you know, seeing new places, learning about new cultures. I mean, being exposed to that kind of thing outside of just like a textbook in school is invaluable.
There's such a difference between reading it and seeing it in person. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I took French for 3 years in high school, and I was like obsessed with the Eiffel Tower. And I remember seeing it for the first time in Paris, and I stood in the middle of Trocadero, and I did it with the Spanish accent, not the French accent. But like all the lines like lined up and pointed to the center of the tip of the Eiffel Tower, and like the Virgo OCD in me was like, oh my God, this is so good. Like, I was just like so inspired. I mean, I was surrounded by muses, so that too.
We had such a movie moment seeing the Eiffel Tower for the first time. No joke. I love telling this story. So it's winter and we're in Paris, and it's getting an hour before sunset, and we got off the subway, and we had a big book with us that was like, you know, the Europe touring book. It's like, you know, 8 inches thick. And we're looking through this thing about directions to the Eiffel Tower, because we knew we had gotten off at the correct subway stop, but we didn't see the Eiffel Tower. And I said out loud, surely we have to be close. And it's so tall. How can we miss this thing? So Jolene says, well, listen, I think it's this way. Let's walk down the street. So we're walking down the street, and there's this giant like shrub brush that's about, I'm going to say 7 or 8 feet tall. So it's above our heads. And we're walking down the sidewalk. And what I didn't know is that the Eiffel Tower was just behind the shrubbery to our right, but I couldn't see it because of the bush. So we're walking down this path, and she has her face down looking at the book, and we're walking side by side, and the bush ends, and I look over and like, holy crap, there's the Eiffel Tower, and it's huge. And she's still reading, and she's still walking. And she's like, no, I think we're almost there. And I reach over with my left hand, and I put my hand on the top of her head and just turned it to the left. And then she stopped and goes, oh.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And just to see things that are older. I mean, prior to all this technology and seeing how, you know, the engineering happened. I mean, like, I would love to see the pyramids of Giza. I mean, like, that is, you know, that kind of stuff is just incredible.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Where was the most fun or interesting place that you've traveled for your career?
I did a short stint in coaching and sales for this like acting scouting company or whatever. And they sent me to Hawaii. And I went to Big Island, and this is a few years ago, and I had the most magical day of my life. Long story short, I spent the night at this Airbnb that was just like this little hut, and I fell asleep to the sound of these little frogs. I forget what they're called right now, but it was just like frog ribbiting all night long, and I just like lulled into deep sleep. And then the next morning had breakfast with like my Airbnb host, like fresh fruit from her garden, including this fruit called the miracle fruit, which is like a little seed that changes your taste palette so that anything bitter turns to sweet.
Huh.
So like coffee tastes like a milkshake, or a lemon tastes like lemonade. So I had that for breakfast. Then I went down to this like nude beach. That's a very famous nude beach. Kept my clothes on. That's not my style. But it's beautiful black sand beach. And 5 minutes in, a pod of like 40 wild dolphins showed up in the water. So I swam with wild dolphins.
Did you actually get to be surrounded by them?
I was surrounded by them. One leapt into the air like 3 feet away from me. It was insane.
God,
and I could
awesome.
just like keep my ears under the water. And it was just like, I don't know. I wish I could make dolphin
You could hear
sounds,
dolphin sound,
like,
but yeah.
And then, if that wasn't enough, had the best poke of my life, and then went to Kilauea, did a hike, and met this cool German kid, and then I met this cool girl who like lived in Venezuela. And then that night, and I guess maybe legally I shouldn't say this, but whatever, trespassed and went to the edge of the volcano. Literally the edge of the crater, which is no longer there because it erupted. But I walked to the edge of the crater and I watched the
earth bubble.
Like, not just like the earth was forming in front of me. Like, it was like Mordor in front of me. It was the most incredible like thing I've ever seen.
So if you were going to give a lecture on travel yourself, What would be the main through line or the point, the overall residing point of your lecture to encouraging people to travel? What would be the point of your lecture?
I feel like travel in some ways is like art. Like art and, connects us as human beings, and, we're able to speak in a different language because we can connect on like that different wavelength, be it music, paint, the stage, film, or whatever. Travel does that on an actual physical level where you're going out and meeting people. I mean, if you're doing travel properly, you're not just sticking to the touristy things and have your face stuck in an iPhone and taking selfies. Like you're interacting with people, with locals, eating local food. You're doing events. You're going to different places and exposing yourself to the rest of the world. I mean,
Well, hopefully you're not exposing yourself.
Right, not exposing yourself in that way. You're growing, you're learning, you're experiencing, and not only are you going out there and experiencing other cultures, but by you going to them, they're also experiencing you. So it's a very mutually, I think, beneficial thing. So I guess that would be it. It would just be like, growth and
But
experience.
why do you think that's an important thing for people to do?
Oh, how is it not important? I mean, like, look at today, like politics just keeps trying to like separate people and what are our differences and how are we different and why is that bad and why are we good? I mean, like, we're all human beings at the end of the day, and we're all on this same planet, wherever we are, whatever our culture is, whatever our background is.
As the famous quote goes, we are all passengers on Spaceship Earth.
100%. So it's important because we're all human. I mean, and we're all connected one way or another. So might as well connect.
I agree. Couldn't agree more, and very well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
On a completely different note, what was your favorite childhood book?
Tom Sawyer. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. He was ginger. I'm ginger. And actually, my aunt gave it to me. So I think back on it fondly. And I spent a summer on a balcony, the balcony outside my bedroom, on a rocking chair reading The Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
What a great memory.
Yeah.
What was the first movie you saw that made you cry?
Technically, I mean, that's an easy one. It's The Land Before Time. I don't remember this, but my parents always tell the story of like I would just watch that movie over and over and over again. And then when the mom dies, they would just know, because all of a sudden they would just hear, and I would like walk into the room like little Luis and be like, no sé por qué se murió la mamá. So that is the first movie that ever made me cry.
How do you feel when you're acting?
Shitty. Often. I feel shitty. I feel like I'm horrible.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like, I get very much in my head. But yeah, I think it's also amazing. I mean, like, when you have those moments where you really connect and just kind of like lose yourself to a degree and you have an experience that you haven't had before, it's exciting and it's cathartic.
You mentioned that you have written a screenplay and you enjoy writing. When you write, do you try to be more original and 100% to Luis, or do you try to deliver what you think readers are going to want?
I don't think I write to please a certain audience. With Sorry Charlie, for example, like I've gotten feedback of like, oh, like this or oh, that. And it's interesting to get feedback that you don't agree with, because it kind of reinforces, as long as you have a reason why, it can reinforce like why you do feel strongly about making that choice.
Absolutely.
And I guess the question becomes like, and it's a complicated question, because then when you're talking about financing and blah, 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 like you might have to like give a little bit, but it also becomes a question of like, well, do you want to dig your heels in and stand for something? How important is it to you? Yeah.
And I believe, I'm a writer myself. I believe when I write, especially if I do entries on the blog about travel, whatever, there's a small element of, well, I mean, I want this to be entertaining and I want it to be something that people will enjoy reading, but I don't ever want the integrity of my message or the story to be lost for the sake of trying to gain an audience. And the hope is that by just being true to myself, they will like what I'm saying, And I think as an artist, it's really important to stick to those guns, because if you compromise who you are for the sake of an audience vote, essentially, you're going to lose everything artistically that matters.
Oh yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And I think people see right through it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people are attracted to something that's unique and original and that they haven't watched before, like, something that's authentic. Fleabag comes to mind.
I love that show,
She
man.
was trying to sell that and make that for like forever. And then she was trying to make her career work. And then she finally wrote this and did it herself. And it's phenomenal. It's truly phenomenal work.
I have told people that both seasons are some of the best writing I have seen on television in probably 10 years. Just fantastic character development and yeah, just great. I loved every single episode.
It's so good.
What does career success look like to you?
I think career success to me is just not having to look for work. I think getting to a place where, work is pretty readily available, whether it's an offer or, not having to like pound on a door and beg for someone to open it. I think that is a certain level of success that I want to get to. I do feel successful now. I mean, I'm happy, I'm doing stuff. Things are moving. So I think there are varying degrees of success, and it's important to acknowledge where you are now. Otherwise, you'll never be happy.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that I love to talk about with people is this idea that the American society has of this constant pursuit of happiness. And I believe that's actually a mistake. I think that people should pursue contentment, and there's a big difference. And they've done a bunch of studies on this, and they found that some of these countries in Europe who have a general population that is more happy than we are on a more regular basis, they don't pursue happiness, they pursue contentment. And people really should kind of Google and do some research about this, because if you can be comfortable and happy with, or content, with the things you have in your life. Let's say you live in an apartment in LA and you have a nice place and it's comfortable. You have, books surrounding you, and you have a couple of good friends, and you eat good meals, and you have your favorite restaurants, etc. You get the point. That is a very content life. From that place, from that foundation, you can have moments of great happiness, but happiness is a fleeting emotion. It's not a permanent state of mind. And so if I ever meet somebody and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm just happy all the time," I'm like, "No, you're full of BS on some level.
Wrong.
Yeah, something's wrong. Yeah. You've got some issues you're not dealing with."
Yeah.
But when I meet someone who generally is like, "No, things are pretty good. I'm pretty content," and and then we go out and we have a great experience where we're happy for several hours doing something fun. That's a much more real and I think valuable experience.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I found, and maybe it was contentment in the last few years, and it was after I quit a shitty job that I had and kind of like became freelance and had more freedom and was doing what I wanted to do. And I was sitting on the rooftop of my old apartment and just kind of like looking out, and had a great view and the Los Angeles palm trees. And I just remember thinking, I was like, I'm good.
Luis, if you weren't acting or writing or working in the entertainment business in some facet, what would you do with your life?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny you bring that question up, because I remember growing up, I like heard my acting teacher forever ago just be like, if you can do anything else besides acting, just do that. Like, if you wouldn't die, if you couldn't ever act again, just give up. And I was like, okay. Like, my Virgo brain was like, well, I wouldn't die, and I'm smart. I guess I could do other things. So maybe I just took it so literally. It actually was disheartening. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not a real artist. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be pursuing this. But now that you asked me that question, I can't think of anything else I'd want to do. I mean, there are things that I could do, because thankfully I'm intelligent and I have resources and I can do things, but like, there's nothing else I would want to do.
That's interesting. I would be perfectly happy or content being a groundskeeper on like some nice estate where all I did was like, if the Palace of Versailles hired me to just help keep up the gardens and the fountains, and I was just planting trees and flowers and stuff, fine. I could live the rest of my life in France doing that. No problem.
I think I would only allow you to do that if you were going to be like a super creepy groundskeeper. Like, you would need to like get into full character and just.
I would be like a Scooby-Doo villain.
Yes.
What are you kids doing here?
Yes, 100%. I would be okay with that.
And I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you damn kids. What was the hardest scene you've had to act so far in your career?
Damn, that's a tough question. I did a scene, and this was just like in class, and it was a scene from Bent. Bent is a play that is the story about two gay men who fall in love in a concentration camp during World War II and the Holocaust. And the scene that I was doing is a scene where the guy is telling the story of how, while he was on the train to the concentration camp, he was forced to rape a dead girl. and watched his boyfriend be murdered in front of him, and had to help because he couldn't be found out to be gay. So if he didn't help beat this guy up that he pretended he did not know, then he would die too. So obviously not a lighthearted scene.
No.
And I was closeted at the time. And I remember, one of the lines is him, he's just saying that, and he just kept saying, I'm not bent, which, meant that he's not gay. And I just broke down in the middle of the class and kind of like had to like regain my composure. So that was tough in a different way. That was, I think, art speaking to me on a deeper level, kind of like having catharsis and like resolving some issues that I obviously didn't want to face at the time.
What's something that you would give up now to become an even better actor than you are?
I mean, there's a lot of things I would give up. I would easily give up meat. I'm kind of doing that a little bit. My mom's not happy about it. I have to do more research on that stuff. But yeah, I'd give up meat, ice cream, a lot of foods. I'd give up my car.
Would you give up sugar altogether?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd give up sugar. Basically anything. I'd give up alcohol, anything like that. I was just in Amsterdam actually, and I went to the Van Gogh Museum, and it was absolutely life-changing. And Van Gogh, in one of his letters to his brother Theo, talks about how art is about sacrifice, and how you sacrifice, sometimes you can ultimately sacrifice your sanity, which he did, and, your life and your health. And I remember thinking, I don't think I could do that. I think if I were to sacrifice, say, my family or my health, my mental health, anything like that, I don't think I would. I love art. It's my favorite thing in this world, and I think it's super important, but I think that's probably where I would draw the line.
You're sitting in a really beautiful pub, and it's a magical pub, and you get to have a drink and dinner with anybody in history, alive or dead, and you get to sit and just have a conversation for 4 hours with this person. Who would it be, and what would your drink of choice be?
This question's so unfair because I judge people so harshly on what their answer is, and I don't want to be judged. Maybe because it is so recent, maybe Van Gogh, to be honest. I think because I was so impacted by my experience there, I actually went to the library, which I haven't gone to the library in ages, and it was actually really nice, and checked out the first of 3 volumes of his letters to Theo. Or not just Theo, but mostly his letters were to his brother. But I think it would be fascinating to have a conversation with him. But there are so many people that I would love to have, conversations with. So you and
Vincent are sitting there. What would you be drinking?
Probably beer. I mean, honestly, whatever he's drinking. As long as it's not absinthe. I don't want anything like that.
If you were going to recommend one place in the world that you think everybody should visit, where would it be?
I mean, Costa Rica is my favorite place on earth.
I figured you were going to say
that. And there's so much to do there. There's volcanoes, there's beaches, there's hikes. I mean, the people are lovely. The food is delicious.
Now, are you worried that by saying this on an international podcast that now everyone's going to start going to Costa Rica and ruin the place?
I don't think I'm that influential personally. But no, I highly encourage it. I mean, it's already, a lot of people go to Costa Rica. It's a big surfing spot. But yeah, I mean, go, but don't ruin the place.
How do you get acquainted with a new place that you're traveling?
I love coffee shops. I like, going somewhere, having a cup of coffee, having a little, snack or something, and then just kind of like sitting there for a little bit.
Now, do you enjoy if a random stranger is like, hey man, where are you from? Or do you like people having random conversations with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if they're an attractive gay man.
Is there anything you don't like about travel?
Everything in life has a price. So if it's an inconvenience to, this, or I guess I like having my stuff, my things. Losing that routine while I'm traveling is kind of a bummer. And it's always really nice to come back home to your bed, your things, your routine. But I don't think that there's something negative to that. I mean, again, it's nice to break routine every once in a while. And it's nice to experience something new and kind of like try new things out. Long lines, but now I have global entry, so yes.
I don't love a 15-hour plane ride. After about hour 6, I'm like, okay, I need to fall asleep now or this is going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Unless you're in business class, which I have flown, and I will
Yes.
say business class is pretty extraordinary.
Yes, I definitely a goal in life, and I'll go back to the question about success. I would love to be able to never have to fly coach again. That
Yeah.
would be nice. I mean, coach is fine, and I can deal, but if I could just always travel business or first class, that would be lovely.
Have you ever had to overcome any particular challenge while traveling that you were proud of saying, hey, I got through that?
Actually, yes. So my sister and I did a Euro trip together, and we were traveling through Europe for 3 weeks. And first of all, that's a challenge to overcome in and of its own. But we encountered an issue in every city that we went, and we were in Munich, Berlin, Paris, London, Dublin, and Amsterdam in 3 weeks. So we were leaving Munich, and it was very early in the morning, and we're on the on the subway station, and there's like one guy passed out on on the seat, and then there's one woman who comes up, and I'm like, okay, we're good. And then I see on the little board or whatever that it's not the final destination, but it's the next stop, and it's in the direction that we're going. So I'm reading, I'm like, okay, we're fine. Long story short, we get on the train. They say something in German. The woman who had gotten on the platform gets off at the next stop, and then we keep going. My sister and I are having a conversation, sitting by the window, and I'm like, "Oh, blah blah blah," and she makes a note about how slowly we're going, and I was like, "Yeah, I guess good thing we left early because we'd never get there in time." And we're talking, and I say, "So, what was your favorite part about Munich?" And my sister immediately responds with, "We're not moving." I look outside, the train's not moving. I go up to the front. We're in the front cart. So I go and I knock on the window, and the conductor, this woman, turns and looks very, very surprised to see us. I'm like, please open the door. She opens the door, like a little bit of a crack. She says something in German, and I said, ich kann sprechen Deutsch. Airport. I'm making the airport, the airplane gesture with my hand. And she's like, 999. And I was like, airport, no, go to the airport. And she's like, 9. And she closes the door, and I was like, okay. So I walk back to my sister, and I was like, grab your bags. I don't think we're going to the airport. And so I'm like, come with me. I feel like the woman would feel a little more comfortable if my sister was there. We go back. Bitch is gone. Wow. She's gone. The train's empty, and we're standing, and now I can see in front of the train, there's just a platform. We're not going anywhere. The train's parked, and we're not next to a platform.
Oh my
so we're
God.
in the middle of a yard of just trains. Long story short, we had to hit the emergency thing and jump out of the train and run across train tracks, run down the train tracks to the next platform, crawl back onto that one, and then head back. So that was Munich. Then leaving Berlin, we were on the plane, and we're talking. And it was like, so what was your favorite part about Berlin? Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, the plane is delayed, blah, blah, blah. So we found that we have now this curse, apparently, where if we ask, what was your favorite part about, something bad will happen. And we have used that as ammunition against each other.
Do you have any travel tips, things you'd like to pass on to people from your experiences traveling around the world?
Definitely plan ahead. I mean, obviously leave room for, experiences and kind of going with the wind, but definitely plan ahead because, and read, especially when you're purchasing flights. I recently purchased a flight. Long story short, I bought one that had a connecting flight from 2 different airports and did not realize that until after I purchased the flight. So read, plan ahead, do your homework.
What's the most beautiful sight that you've seen while traveling?
I was recently in Morocco and saw literally the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my life. It was at Tagazout, and it was absolutely stunning. Oh, and of course the crater in Hawaii. I mean, Jesus.
Who's the most interesting person that you've met while traveling?
Myself. I don't know. Vomit. I'm friends with, my sister and I are still friends with a group of people that we met while traveling through Europe. So, yeah.
I want to ask you about being a gay man and traveling. Is there a difference for you traveling domestically in different parts of the country? Do you experience any prejudice, let's say in LA versus the Midwest or other places you've been?
I actually have not really traveled through a lot of the United States. I would love to. I would love to take like a road trip. And I've heard, there are places in the South that are absolutely beautiful.
This country is beautiful. And
yeah,
I've driven across it 3 times. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'm not going to lie. There is definitely a part of me that does hesitate when it comes to, places where I feel like I might not be welcome. I've actually been to Wichita, Kansas for work and was very pleasantly surprised. It is beautiful there. And I remember, I do like to, look up a gay bar or something when I go out. And it's not that I need to go to a gay bar, but there's something about like going to a place where you're safe. When you're part of like a disenfranchised or like a minority or a group, like a community like that, it is important to feel like, you want to surround yourself with people who,
sure,
are similar. I was walking to this one gay bar in downtown Wichita, and I, got out of the car, and this guy wearing like a kind of like sparkly, jacket or whatever, like almost was going to ask me for directions. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then this couple, presumably straight, it was a man and a woman, and they were like, oh yeah, that's down over there. And I was just like, huh, that's really cool. And then I went to the gay bar, and they were having drag night, and there were 2 older women, like, by older, I'm sorry, I mean like, 40s, 50s, like mother kind of.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. You look fantastic. But they were watching, and I'd had a couple of drinks, and I just kind of like asked one of them, and I was like, what are you doing here? And she pointed to the stage to the person performing in drag and said, that's my son. I'm here to support. And
that's awesome.
Cried. I feel like I've been talking about me crying a lot. My sister's a crier. I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I started crying, and she's like, oh my God, honey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I didn't expect this. Like it was. So while yes, there are reservations when it comes to travel, I think that there's also, again, room for meeting people and having new experiences and surprising yourself.
Have you ever had to hide your sexuality while traveling anywhere for fear of safety?
I wouldn't say that I've had to actively like hide my sexuality per se. I mean, several factors go into this. One, I have, I guess, quote unquote, the privilege that I'm hetero passing. I mean, there are people out there who are either more flamboyant or it's more quote unquote evident based on stereotypical factors, whether your sexuality is blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily present that. So I guess, I do have that privilege of quote unquote passing. And that's actually a term that's most used actually within the trans community. Somebody who's trans, who's passing for non-trans means that they just have physical attributes, blah, blah, blah. So I've never really felt like I needed to do that. And even Latino, like I don't look Latino. I'm white. I have red hair. So like somebody wouldn't look at me and be like, oh, he's Latino, so I'm going to treat him like I would treat,
I mean, the first time I met you and someone's like, oh, he's from Venezuela. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
So
and I mean, and it's funny because like as a member of the Latinx community, I definitely feel like I'm a part of it, and it's a very varied. Like we're not all darker skin, we're brown. Like we all have different looks, but it is definitely a privilege that I have because I'm white. And for example, if I get pulled over by a cop, they're not going to look at me and treat me. If they're prejudiced against Hispanics, they're not going to treat me like I'm Hispanic because I don't look Hispanic. So it's sad that that's even like a thing.
It is very sad.
It's very sad. So all that to say that I've never really felt like I really needed to like hide something and like change my way of life in order to like fit in somewhere because I was scared. But it is something that does cross my mind when I travel. Whether it's certain parts of the US or I was in Morocco, my mom was like, hey, just, heads up, blah, blah, blah. And it's unfortunate that there are certain cultures out there that do make you feel unsafe and make you feel like you don't belong, sometimes to a degree of actual physical safety. So it is something that is a very real thing for certain communities out there.
How was Morocco?
Morocco actually ended up being absolutely beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. The people were so, so, so lovely. I got to speak a little French there because they do speak some French. And I saw some of the most stunning sunsets I've ever seen in my entire life. And my cousin actually lived there for months and became, very close to some of the, local people there. And they were amazing. The food, oh my God, the food in Morocco was so good.
It's actually very high on my list of places I'd like to go. I've always wanted to hike in the Atlas Mountains and see Casablanca and all that,
Yeah.
It's down the bucket list.
Yeah, I went with my family, and it was really, really great trip because I went with my my parents, my sister, and then I went with my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, and then my cousin, my older cousin, who I mentioned had been living there for like 6 or 8 months with his girlfriend, and we all got to like spend the holidays together. Every single one of us, except for two, my cousin and myself, got violently ill though, like really, really ill.
Was it because of water or because the food?
We don't know. I think honestly, it was just like a bug that they kept, like it was just like they passed on to each other. I don't know, because we were eating all kinds of different food. But I mean, the tagine is so good. If my mom is listening to this, I think she's probably like, oh no.
Is it different for you, do you believe, traveling in the world as a gay man versus someone who's straight, let's say? And forgive the terminology, I'm just going
Sure.
with,
Yeah, sure. Certainly. I mean, it's different for me. Everybody's different. I mean, it was heartbreaking to me, the realization that my sister and my mom walking down the street have a completely different experience than I do. So as women...
Heartbreaking how?
Women. I mean, women, just for being women, walk down the street in a different way. Like somebody, once told me that as men, like, if you're a woman walking down the street and you sense somebody behind you, you have a different reaction. Like, I don't necessarily feel like unsafe, you know what I mean? But with everything that's been happening and coming to light and all these things, like it really makes you think like, wow, like everybody does have their journey, and there are these, stereotypes and situations and things that do cause everybody's journey to be a little bit different. So yes, certainly as a gay man, I do have a different experience.
And is there something specific you can tell the audience that is different for you than maybe say for me? Like if you and I were walking down the streets of Paris together, are we going to have a different experience by virtue of sexual orientation, or are we going to have a different experience just by culture and how we're raised?
I think that if I were wearing like a pride shirt, and I have pride shirts, and the thought does cross my mind of like, when do I feel comfortable wearing this? When do I not feel comfortable wearing this? And that's so ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, first of all, they would be like, those two incredibly good looking guys must be a couple.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yes, daddy. But no, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that we have to have like those second guessing of like, oh, can I wear this? What are people going to think? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, but yes, I mean, I do think that if I were wearing, like a pride shirt, there are people who would look at that and be like, oh, okay. But that being said, for example, I love seeing gay couples holding hands in public. Like it's great. And I think that while there are some negative aspects of, due to external factors, right, of being a part of the gay community and like, oh, people might be looking at blah, blah, blah. There's also some really beautiful aspects, traveling, when you travel, like you have a community, like if you have a social app that you can, connect with people and like, that person has something that is innately similar to you.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's familiar. Familiar is actually a beautiful word because it implies family, and that's exactly what it is. So with all the negative sides of it, I think it's also really beautiful because I can go somewhere and be like, if I go to a gay bar, I know that everyone there is family. And that's actually chum they say. It's like, oh, you're family. I didn't know you were family. Like that means like I didn't know you were gay. I didn't know you were part of the community. So we do have that. There is that's really beautiful that connects us. And it is great to experience that all over the world.
So if you and I were walking down the street together, as you say, and you're wearing a pride shirt, if I didn't know us and I saw us walking down the street, I might think to myself, oh, so there's a gay couple. Or there's, I don't know that I would think, oh, there's a gay man and his friend,
right?
His straight friend.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And I think this is a tough thing because as human animals, which is what we all essentially are, people forget that we're animals. I think we look at something and we go, oh, what is this? And if we see something unfamiliar or strange, we'll be like, what is this thing? And I think, Raggy. I think a lot of messed up things come from people's tilt of the head, questioning glance. What is this? It's unfamiliar to me. And I think that is actually where a lot of the problems come from that we need to address. Is just because something's not familiar or different doesn't mean it's bad.
Right. And I think that's one of the great things about travel. Again, exposing people and becoming all of a sudden seeing something that's like going to be like, oh, that's unfamiliar, but I don't have to feel threatened. I don't have to be like, blah, blah, blah. But having that exposure to somebody, a different culture, a different, sexuality, a different gender identity, different race, anything, it is beautiful to see all these new and different things.
Totally.
And we do it in nature all the time. I mean, when we see something that's interesting, we're like, oh, wow, I've never seen that. But for some reason, and I don't know if it's because it is so different from us, if we see a different animal or a different, it's a completely different species, that we can look at it in awe and like amusement and like interest. When it's within our own species, it's almost like, oh, it's so close, but it's not quite me. So my guard goes up.
Yeah, and it would be a beautiful world if people could put down the guard and go, well, now that's curious. Let's go talk to that person, or let's have an interesting conversation. Let's find out more and get more information instead of judging and being,
Right.
mean.
And then add on to that the stereotypes that are reinforced, with people saying negative things and, this so-and-so is this, so-and-so is that. If you're this, that means you're this. I mean, you add all that onto that brain of yours, then your guard is up, and it's like reinforced by these negative stereotypes that aren't true.
We've talked so much in today's world about diversity and the challenges we face and acceptance and all that stuff, and people have asked me like, well, how do you feel about X, Y, and Z in some particular issue? And my general response is always, man, the bottom line is I dream of a world where we're not having these conversations because we don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have never understood, and nor will I, why this is an issue. Why can't people just be who they are and everyone just leave each other alone? Like, just respect everyone's choices. It just doesn't affect people's lives the way they imagine it does,
Yeah. I mean, there are people out there who you're like, oh, why do you have a gay pride parade? Like, why do you need a gay pride parade? Or why do you need to tell everyone that you're gay? Why do you need to come out? And I agree with you 100%. Like, I hope one day that nobody has to come out. I hope nobody feels like they're hiding something.
Well, because there is no coming out.
Exactly.
That's the dream world.
Exactly. And like Pride Parade, for its pros and cons, I mean, it is a beautiful celebration of something, and it's a celebration of a community that has received a lot of negativity, and negativity is putting it very mildly.
Yeah.
I mean, people have died, and people continue to die on a regular basis, and we're not obviously the only community that has that issue. So it exists because you want to show that you are here, that you exist, that you are part of a community, you're not alone. And it's less to show other people who are not part of that community, and more about showing people who are hiding and a part of themselves, that it is okay, that they're not alone, and that they should hopefully one day feel comfortable to be able to come out and not feel like they're, on a journey by themselves.
Well, it's interesting growing up in the Midwest. If someone asked me today, would you encourage a kid, let's say there's someone in high school, man or woman, doesn't matter, gender neutral, whomever, who is hiding their identity because out of fear of being beaten up or worse, and they're living in a Southern or Midwestern community, would I tell them, hey, have the courage to stand up and be proud of who you are? And to be honest with you, Luis, I would look at them and go, well, you should gauge the reaction of what you think is going to happen. If you're going to get your ass kicked or possibly killed, no.
100%.
Then the answer is not necessarily not to come out. The answer is to get the fuck out of there as soon as possible.
Yeah.
It is to get free of that situation as soon as possible and get to a safe place where you can be yourself, until the day comes that those people in those communities that would inflict violence upon others simply for their beliefs, until we can educate them or they die off or whatever, until the next generation comes around that is more accepting, then if it's not safe for you, then I couldn't in good conscience encourage you to put yourself in a bad situation,
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate because you also don't want to isolate. You don't want to have to, leave all the people who are ignorant by themselves because they'll have no other exposure. And I think, people, to go back to the whole why travel, is because you're connecting, and you're not just being exposed to different cultures, you're also exposing other people to your culture. And, if, for example, like you have a great conversation with somebody in Russia or another country where, it's looked down upon, again, putting it mildly, to be gay, and you're having a great conversation with somebody and they're like, oh my God, I love you, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And then they find out that you're gay. All of a sudden, like, you're not just like some, pervert or something like that they've learned about on some propaganda. You're a human being who they've enjoyed and gotten to know, and they're part of this community that you have been misinformed about and have these prejudices toward. So I think it is also important to have that
Agreed,
exposure.
completely. Yeah.
But again, like you said, gauge what the situation is. If you're going to be in physical danger, then I mean, you first.
Yeah. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a very interesting conversation with Jolene recently because there have been some terms that I grew up with, being raised in Ohio, that are apparently no longer okay to say. And as human beings evolve and language evolves, of course, it's a natural thing that, oh, hey, this is now offensive. A few years back, and this is going to make me sound like a complete ignoramus, but I used the word Oriental because when I grew up, Asian people of the descent from the Orient were just called Orientals. Anyway, I found out it was an offensive term. And the thing is, I have no problem that it's not okay to say, and I'm happy to not use words when they come up like that. But I have a problem with the fact that we don't really get notified of these things. Not that there should be like,
you don't get an iOS
there's
update.
There's not like a text that goes out to the entire world being like, all right, from now on, we cannot say the word gypsy. It's offensive. And okay. So number one, how do we inform people in a positive manner? Hey, it's not cool to say this anymore. And B, how do we teach people to be tolerant so that if you and I are having a conversation and I use a word that is offensive, especially with like transgendered or whatever, if someone says tranny, I know that's now offensive, right? So the tolerance that's needed, especially from someone in the LGBTQ community looking at someone who's perhaps straight, who doesn't know, to say, hey, you know what? If you don't mind, it's not really cool to say that. We prefer this term. Okay, cool, man. Yeah, no problem. Sorry about that. Didn't know. I think on both sides of that fence, human beings need to be a little more lenient because things are changing rapidly in our world and we need to give each other time to adapt. And I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, but do you have any ideas of how we can encourage people to be more tolerant and to just educate each other and God, just be kind,
Sure. I actually personally love this topic, and I've always been one to talk about religion and politics. Like, I think it's important. Like, people call these things taboo, and I'm like, we should talk about them.
Absolutely.
There are things that, if you can be an adult and listen and be respectful, then why wouldn't you? I mean, these are things that are formative and important and fundamental for a lot, most people. So I'm glad that you're bringing this up. And I agree. I think that there needs to be tolerance on both ends of the spectrum, pun intended. But, I actually just had this situation come up while I was traveling, and somebody in the group that we were traveling with, we were in Amsterdam, and we were talking about the red light district. And, she mentioned how it's like, oh, did you know that the red light, and I forget it, she says like red light just means normal. I don't know if she said normal, so I could be misquoting. But the point is she said, oh, and blue light, they're transies. And I immediately had like that gut instinct of like, okay, well, that's not okay. You can't say that. So I felt like I just very politely was like, actually, so it's trans. And she's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And that was kind of it. And then I ended up having a longer conversation because it was like, well, I'm sure she didn't mean it. Somebody told me, it's like, well, she didn't mean it in a negative or offensive way. And I was like, no, I didn't get that at all. I didn't feel like she was being derogatory or anything like that. But she used a term that is outdated or not appropriate. And I just wanted to let her know, just like you brought up right now. It was very casual. I didn't like school her or anything. And then somebody else told me, it's like, well, but then like I'm the kind of person that if I hear about that, then I want to know why. And then it becomes a thing. And it's like,
I do too, actually. I'm like, well, why is this what it is? How did it come to be? And
sure. And that's your choice. And I think that's a perfectly great, that means you want to learn, and that's totally fine. And maybe like, if we're hanging out with a group of people, like right now is not the time for that conversation. And I'm more than happy to be like, hey, yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about it some other time. No problem. I think that if people just kind of keep it as like an educational thing, and instead, like if I had reacted and been like, well, that's bigoted, that's ignorant, like you can't say that, that would be inappropriate on my end. That would be an inappropriate thing because she wasn't meaning it that way.
Sure.
So I think that everybody can just like stay on the same level of just kind of like, hey, let me enlighten you on a little something that maybe you're not aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can summarize this a little bit, right? We can say, just don't assume the worst of people.
Yeah. Yeah, don't assume the worst in people. And I think too, and it's sad to see this, and I do see this a lot. We mentioned the Latinx thing. I feel like people, then the people who are against it, they're like, well, why are we even bothering with the Latinx? Like, why are these liberal? Why is this like, this whole like, now we're going out of proportion. Now we're changing language. And it's like, first of all, we've been changing language since language began.
True.
Like, language is an evolution. Like the whole point of this whole journey of life is to learn and to grow. So if we can grow and learn and be more tolerant, I think we're going in the right direction. Does that mean we have to go full speed ahead and like leave people like just like bodies? No, and that's not what's happening. What's happening is there are communities that have been disenfranchised and people who have not been seen and have not seen themselves represented, be it in language, in media, in whatever, and they're speaking up. And I think it's important to listen to them. And don't feel like, the rug's being taken out from under you. Just take a second. Not to go on too much, but I've had that within myself, I've had to check myself. Like I remember somebody was telling me about somebody who was like, they were born male, but now they identify as female, but they present male, but they actually want to be referred to as they. And I remember like my immediate instinct was like, oh, for the love of God, like, why is this so complicated? And I had to check myself because I was like, hold up. First of all, what are the chances you're going to meet this person and your life is going to be so complicated for 2 whole seconds where they're going to tell you that they actually prefer to be referred to as they, and you're going to have to just make a change. Mm-hmm. Whoa. Oh no, the complication of your life.
Well, and you also don't even need the entire backstory. All you need is they prefer to be addressed as they.
Sure. And also they're a human being.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, if you wanted to be called a unicorn and you really felt like, I mean, I'm using
only
something.
On days that end in Y.
Exactly. So it's like, if you want to be called a unicorn, I'm saying something absolutely ridiculous because there are people who view that as ridiculous. There are people out there who view somebody who identifies as they or identifies as something that is not to them familiar as ridiculous. So say you want to be called unicorn and you really truly wanted to be called unicorn. What kind of a dick would I have to be to continue to refuse to call you a unicorn? Like you're a person. Mm-hmm. Like at the end of the day, you're a person and that's it. Like be respectful, listen to each other. Now, that being said.
But I also don't think it's fair for me to expect everyone to call me unicorn.
Exactly. And that's where I was going. So for example, if I were to not call you unicorn because we've never met before and you don't look like a unicorn or you don't present, or I would never have even thought that, and I say something else, if you blow up at me, then that's also kind of inappropriate. That being said, though, your experience, in a sense, also, like, I'm dealing with this for the first time because I'm not you. You're probably not getting called unicorn on a regular basis. And if this is something that's a very personal and like deep-seated issue within you, it gets to you much more than it would get to me. So at the same time, it's like people have bad days and there are people out there whose shoes are worn because of society. And yes, they should be tolerant, but at the same time, it is understandable that they might be a little bit more sensitive about that. And it's, for me, like what the unfortunate thing is when we are trying to make progress, then all of a sudden there's that part of us that just like, oh my God, so much is changing and it's so overwhelming. And it's like, let's relax for a second. It's really not that overwhelming. Again, statistically speaking, probably not going to have this issue in your actual life, like, like this. So like take a step back and then also like, what's the harm? Again, if we're building a more tolerant society and welcoming society, then what is the problem? It's like the whole,
the problem is people stuck in their ways. They're just
exactly. And then also with, people within that community, like for example, the Latinx term, people are like, well, I'm Latino and I don't want to change it. So, and it's like, okay, well, you're one person within that community. Just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean that it's not important to other people. Mm-hmm. So again, at the end of the day, it should come down to discourse and just communication. And that's a big part of like experiencing other cultures and experiencing other people, and travel really, really helps with that.
Thank you for bringing that around full circle.
You're welcome.
Well, on a lighter note, what's your favorite place that you've eaten in the whole world?
My mom's house.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer.
Say that.
Politically correct and everything.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I definitely, if anyone ever goes to Amsterdam, I recommend this place called the Pancake Bakery. And I just went back for the second time, and it was great.
Now, is it a pancake place?
Yeah. So they have pancakes, but they have like crepes and pancakes, and they're a little thinner. And then they have one that's like Indian pancake, so it's like got curry and whatever. It's not like just sweet and like they've got the savory. It's really delicious.
Because I have a post coming out about this place in Columbus, Ohio that we went, where they make these little pancake balls and they fill them with different kinds of filling. So I got I think I got apple cinnamon or something last time, and they're like these squishy pancake balls with delicious filling with maple syrup and powdered sugar. And honest to God, I was like, this is crazy good.
Well, I haven't had breakfast, so now I'm really hungry. No, it's funny because whenever you ask me about like my favorite place, I keep going to like abroad, and I haven't really, I guess, thought about, within the US. And I guess maybe in part because I haven't traveled a lot through the US. I've been to like the major cities. So maybe that should be more on my bucket list. Mexico City also has some delicious, delicious food.
Is there a Venezuelan restaurant in Los Angeles that you like?
There was one, it closed. It was in Beverly Hills. There have been others that are around. There's a food truck. There's a few different places.
What's a typical Venezuelan dish that's really good?
A typical Venezuelan dish would be arepas. Arepas is like the Venezuelan dish. It's like this cornmeal, and it's like a saucer, and then you cut it in half, and then you stuff it with like whatever you want, and it's absolutely delicious.
Sounds yummy.
Have I not made them for you?
No.
Oh,
Now I know what we're doing next weekend. Looking back on your whole life so far, is there something that you wish you had known when you first started traveling that you would tell your younger self as a piece of advice?
Maybe to put myself out there more. I think there are times where, and I consider myself to be pretty like outgoing and extroverted, but there are times where I'm like, I'll just stay in and like not do a whole lot, and I'll just like watch TV as opposed to actually putting myself like out there. So maybe like do that more, and I should know that now too. Like there are times where I still do that, so maybe like actually just do more.
If you were going to give any advice or talk to people in the Latinx and LGBTQ communities, maybe someone who's living a life in the closet or is afraid, what would you say to them now?
I would for sure like them to know that they're not alone, and it does get better. And I know that's like the typical go-to, but it's so, so very true, and it is tough. And I can't imagine, because I was fortunate enough to never have the experience that a lot of people really, experience of coming out and being betrayed by their family and the people that they care about the most. But that being said, you're not alone, and there are plenty of people out there like you, more than you know. And if you, are a little patient and you give yourself time for when you're ready, they'll still be there.
I like to ask every person who sits here, what's your whoopee? What's your security blanket, your one item that you take with you when you're traveling no matter what?
Okay, so non-technological, I would have to say I have a crystal that I travel with that my ex gave me years ago now. And I still kind of like use it for travel, and it's like a protection talisman and whatnot. So
cool.
I have that. Oh, and baby wipes.
I completely second the baby wipes.
Yes,
the world is
the whoopee for poopy.
whoopee for poopy. I completely think the world's a better place with baby wipes.
Everywhere should have a bidet.
I agree.
Yes.
You know how much happier people would be if every toilet had a bidet?
Yeah, Cheryl Selgas 2020.
Wow, that's funny. Luis, I like to ask everybody at the end of the podcast to play a game called 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird. I have a list of 299 life and philosophical questions I've collected from friends and family and the lovely internet. You get to pick two numbers.
Okay.
I will read you those two questions, and hopefully you'll answer them.
Let's do 29
and
86.
29. Who is that one person you can talk to about just anything?
That's fitting. My sister and I were both born on the 29th. I was in August. She was in September. So that's why I picked 29. So I think it's fitting that I say my sister.
That's beautiful. And you said 86? What's the... Oh, I can't wait to hear this. What's the closest you've ever come to being arrested?
I don't think I've ever been close to being arrested. I've done things, obviously breaking into the volcano. That would have been bad news.
Would have been a lot worse if it erupted.
Yep. Or if the random German kid who I met that day hiking pushed me into the volcano. I mean, that would have been pretty bad. Like super easy murder to get away with. I've always been a pretty good kid, I gotta say. I think the closest, what felt like I was getting arrested is when I was very, very little. It was like pre-elementary school, and my friend was grabbed me by the legs and started dragging me down the leg, like by the legs down these stairs, and I grabbed onto this girl's leg, and I was like, help, help, and she started hitting me with like her lunchbox, and I ended up in having to sign the book, and the book was like the permanent signature book, and I had a breakdown. I was so sad. I was like crying. I feel like the principal must have felt horrible for me, because maybe some other kids are like, whatever, fuck this book. And I'm just like 10 years old, and I'm like, this is just the hard, please don't, I'll never be president. Like, like I just could never do anything. Yeah. So like, it felt like I was being arrested.
What's your spirit animal?
I've always identified as a puppy. Like just like energetic and
particular breed?
Maybe a beagle. Like, just like loyal and like, loves you and just wants to like please you and like yeah. But then my friends just say I'm a cat because I'm a catty bitch. So perspective, I guess.
As an actor, when we close here, if you could only ever watch one movie for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I think Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, there are so many movies that I love, but that's just an easy one to watch. Or Devil Wears Prada. I love that. Or Bridesmaids, Mean Girl. If The Devil Wears Prada is on television and I sit down and watch more than 30 seconds, I'm watching the whole thing.
Louise, it's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're very welcome.
And hey, have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Please join me next week when I interview Australian chef Justine Whitney. She talks about traveling the world as a child, making the move to America, and cuisine from all around the globe. It's a delicious and yummy podcast you don't want to miss. So until then, if you'd like some more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media @memoriesofamoonbird.